2 days had passed since the unsettling incident of the disappearing robbers and the mysterious witch. The atmosphere at the police station was markedly different from the recent chaos. The air buzzed with the usual hum of activity, but for once, there were no urgent calls or unexplained phenomena to deal with. It was a rare respite from the whirlwind of recent events, and the officers relished the relative calm. Harry sat at his desk, sifting through a stack of routine paperwork. The tasks felt almost mundane compared to his recent grappling with high-stakes cases. He glanced up to find his colleagues engaged in casual conversation, their voices a comforting backdrop to the steady rhythm of typing and phone calls. Thompson was sprawled in his chair, his feet propped up on a desk, flipping through a magazine. "So, what's everyone planned for the weekend?" he asked, looking up with a casual smile. Daniels, who was busy organising files, looked up with a shrug. "Not much, honestly. I'm considering catching a movie and maybe hitting that new pub down the street. It's been a while since I've just relaxed." Harry nodded in agreement. "Sounds nice. I've got that lunch at the Borough with Andrew on Sunday, but other than that, I'm looking forward to a quiet couple of days. It'll be good to just unwind." Thompson raised an eyebrow, a playful grin spreading across his face. "Ah, the Borough. That's Charlie's place, right? How's that going? You and Andrew have been pretty tight lately." Harry chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, that's Charlie's family home. It's been good. Andrew's excited to meet everyone, so it should be interesting." Daniels smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Meeting the family, huh? That's always a big deal. Hope it goes well. Sometimes family gatherings can be more intense than a crime scene." Harry laughed softly. "Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. Charlie's mum seems nice enough, and I'm sure they'll make Andrew feel welcome. Plus, it's a chance to take a work break and enjoy some good food." Thompson looked thoughtful for a moment. "You know, it's nice to have a quiet day every now and then. Gives us a chance to catch our breath before the next big case comes along." As Harry glanced around the room, he realised how much he appreciated these small moments of normalcy. The occasional banter, the shared stories, and the simple routines provided a comforting contrast to the unpredictability of their job. Harry's phone buzzed, breaking the momentary silence. He glanced at the screen, seeing a text from Andrew reminding him about their dinner plans that evening. He smiled, tucking the phone away. "Well," Harry said, pushing back his chair, "I'd better get going. I've got a dinner with Andrew later, but it's nice to have these quiet moments to look forward to." Daniels and Thompson nodded in agreement, their camaraderie evident in their easy smiles and casual conversation. As Harry gathered his things and prepared to leave, he felt a sense of relief and gratitude for the simple pleasures of life: family, friends, and the occasional peaceful day. The morning sun streamed through the curtains as Harry and Andrew stirred. The peaceful start to their day was interrupted by the sudden ring of Harry's phone on the bedside table. Harry reached over and answered with a groggy but curious tone. "Hello," he mumbled. "Morning, Harry," came Charlie's cheerful voice. "Just calling to let you know I'll pick you up in about half an hour. I thought it would be easier if I came by to drive us to the Borough. I hope that's okay." Harry blinked in surprise, glancing over at Andrew, who was already starting to stretch and wake up. "Oh yeah, that's fine. Thanks for the lift. We'll be ready in a bit." "Great," Charlie replied. "See you soon." Harry hung up and turned to Andrew, sitting in bed with a bemused expression. "Charlie's coming to pick us up. Looks like we're getting a bit of a ride to the Borough." Andrew rubbed his eyes and chuckled. "Well, that's convenient. I guess we'd better get moving then. Don't want to keep Charlie waiting." The couple quickly got dressed and finished preparing. Andrew chose a smart, casual outfit that Harry had approved, a blue shirt with dark jeans, and Harry opted for a comfortable sweater and jeans, wanting to stay casual but presentable. After a final check in the mirror and ensuring they had everything they needed, they went downstairs. True to his word, Charlie arrived promptly, his car parked outside with the engine running. He was grinning as he saw Harry and Andrew approaching, holding the car door open for them. "Morning, you two," Charlie greeted warmly. "Ready for a day at the Burrow?" Harry smiled as he climbed into the passenger seat, following Andrew behind. "Absolutely. Thanks for the ride, Charlie. It's a nice change from driving ourselves." "No problem at all," Charlie said, sliding into the driver's seat. "It'll be nice to have some company on the drive. Besides, getting everyone together for these kinds of gatherings is a bit of a tradition." The conversation flowed easily as they drove away from the city and headed into the countryside. The road stretched before them, flanked by rolling hills and lush greenery. Charlie and Harry chatted about the week's events and the latest updates at the zoo, while Andrew listened, occasionally chiming in with questions or comments. "So, Charlie," Andrew said, leaning forward a little, "what's the Burrow like? I've heard nothing about it, and I'm unsure what to expect." Charlie glanced in the rearview mirror with a smile. "The Burrow is quite something. It's a bit of a quirky, cosy place. Definitely has its charm. It's been in the Weasley family for generations, so there's a lot of history and warmth there. The whole family is really welcoming, and they love having guests." Andrew nodded, clearly intrigued. "That sounds wonderful. I'm looking forward to seeing it for myself." Harry leaned back, relieved, listening to Andrew and Charlie's easy conversation. The drive was a pleasant way to ease into the family gathering, and the familiarity between Charlie and Harry helped to set Andrew at ease. After about an hour on the road, Charlie navigated the final stretch of winding country roads that led to the Burrow. The distinctive, charming ramshackle house came into view. Its cosy appearance and sprawling garden evoked a sense of homey comfort. "Here we are," Charlie announced as he pulled into the driveway. The Burrow stood as a testament to the Weasley family's love and warmth, and its mismatched, cosy appearance immediately made it feel inviting. The front door was already open, and Harry could see Mrs. Weasley waving enthusiastically as they approached. As they exited the car, Harry felt excitement mingled with a touch of nerves. The day ahead promised to be unique, filled with family, good food, and the opportunity to bridge the gap between his world and Andrew's. Charlie grinned as he opened the door for Harry and Andrew. "Let's make this a day to remember." The three of them walked towards the house, ready to embrace the warmth and hospitality of the Burrow and enjoy the day with the Weasley family. As Harry, Andrew, and Charlie approached the Burrow, the familiar sight of the cosy, slightly crooked house brought a wave of nostalgia to Harry. The warm, inviting appearance of the home, with its vibrant garden and eclectic charm, was as welcoming as ever. However, today there was a subtle change. No trace of the magical enchantments that usually adorned the Burrow, a necessary precaution given Andrew's status as a Muggle. The absence of these magical elements, while a stark contrast to the usual lively atmosphere, was a testament to the Weasley family's efforts to make Andrew feel at home. Charlie led the way up the path, and as they reached the front door, Mrs. Weasley greeted them with her usual warmth. Her welcoming smile softened as she took in Andrew's nervous but excited expression. "Harry, Charlie, and you must be Andrew," Mrs. Weasley said, her voice full of genuine friendliness. "I'm Molly Weasley, and it's so lovely to finally meet you. We've heard so much about you." Andrew offered a polite, slightly nervous smile. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Weasley. Thank you for having me." "Oh, please, call me Molly," she replied, warmly hugging Andrew. "We're so glad you could join us. Everyone's been looking forward to meeting you." As they entered the house, the aroma of a hearty meal, roast, freshly baked bread, and the promise of a delicious dessert greeted them. The living room was cosy and filled with the chatter of the Weasley family catching up and preparing for lunch. Ginny Weasley was the next to approach. Her presence was as familiar as ever, but her demeanour was slightly awkward as she greeted Harry and Andrew. Harry felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with unresolved emotions from their past relationship. "Harry," Ginny said, offering a tentative smile, "it's good to see you again. And you must be Andrew. It's nice to meet you." Andrew extended his hand, his smile polite, but a bit unsure. "Hi, Ginny. Nice to meet you." Ginny shook his hand and then turned to Harry, her eyes briefly meeting his with mixed emotions before she rejoined the group. Harry nodded, accepting the moment with quiet composure. The living room was filled with greetings and conversation as the rest of the family introduced themselves to Andrew. Percy, with his usual seriousness, and Ron, with his more laid-back demeanour, both offered friendly welcomes. Now running the joke shop with Ron, George was lively and engaging, keeping the mood light with his humour. The atmosphere became more relaxed as everyone settled into the comfortable, mismatched armchairs and sofas. The Weasley children found their places around the room, chatting and catching up, while Mrs. Weasley, with the help of a few younger hands, made sure everything was ready for the meal. "So, Andrew," Mrs. Weasley said, as she bustled about with preparations, "what do you do? Harry's told us a bit, but I'd love to hear more about you." Andrew looked around at the friendly faces, his initial nervousness melting away as he began to feel more at ease. "Well, I'm a police officer. I work alongside Harry at the London Police Department. It's quite a demanding job, but it's fulfilling." "That sounds fascinating," Mrs. Weasley said with genuine interest. "It must be quite a responsibility. Harry's mentioned a bit about his work, but it's always nice to hear more." As the conversation flowed and everyone got to know Andrew better, the initial awkwardness faded, replaced by a sense of warmth and acceptance. Despite its lack of magical embellishments, the Burrow was filled with the same heartfelt hospitality that had always characterized the Weasley family. The meal was a time for the family to learn more about Andrew, his life, and his experiences, and for Andrew to feel more at home with the Weasleys. Before lunch was served, the group decided to take advantage of the crisp autumn day. Harry, Ron, George and Charlie took Andrew on a tour of the Burrow property, showcasing the unique charm and cosy nooks of the Weasley family's home. As they stepped outside, Andrew marvelled at the sprawling garden, which was currently free of the mischievous gnomes that usually populated it. The garden was a burst of autumn colours. Crimson, gold and orange leaves carpeted the ground, and the trees looked like they had been painted by a master artist. "This is the garden," Ron said with a grin. "Usually it's a bit more chaotic. Gnomes tend to get into everything." Andrew laughed, looking around. "It's beautiful. I can see why you enjoy it so much." George stepped forward, clearly excited. "And over here is the treehouse. It's a bit of a relic, but it's seen a lot of adventures." They walked towards the old treehouse, nestled high in a sturdy oak. The wooden structure looked charmingly rustic, with ropes and ladders leading up to it. George climbed up first, followed by Harry, who helped Andrew with a grin. "Be careful, the ladder's a bit wobbly," Charlie warned with a chuckle as he followed them up. The treehouse, though simple, had a fantastic view of the surrounding countryside. Andrew took a moment to soak in the panoramic vista, clearly impressed by the picturesque setting. "Wow, this is incredible," Andrew said, eyes sweeping over the view. "It's like something out of a storybook." "Yeah, it's one of our favourite spots," Harry said, leaning against the wall of the treehouse. "We used to spend hours here, just hanging out and daydreaming." After descending from the treehouse, George and Charlie exchanged a conspiratorial glance. "You know what this calls for?" George asked, his eyes twinkling. Charlie nodded enthusiastically. "A game of rugby! It's a lot of fun and a great way to blow off the steam." Ron clapped his hands together. "Perfect! Let's get everyone together. They headed back to the garden, where the rest of the family had gathered. Hermione and Percy were busy chatting near the house, while Ginny, Harry and the others were starting to assemble for the game. "Hey everyone!" George called out. "We're setting up for a game of rugby. Who's in?" Hermione and Percy exchanged glances and politely declined, preferring to stay out of the physical activity. Ginny, however, was quick to join in, her competitive spirit clearly piqued. "Count me in," Ginny said with a smirk. "I haven't played rugby in ages." The group split into two teams, Harry, Ron, Ginny and Andrew on one side and George, Charlie and others on the other. The game began with enthusiastic cheers and a lot of laughter. Harry and Andrew quickly fell into a rhythm, and their teamwork was evident as they passed the ball and strategized. The game was fast-paced and full of high-spirited fun. The autumn leaves scattered across the field added an extra element of excitement as players dove and scrambled. At one point, Charlie managed to get the ball from Harry with a quick maneuver. Harry, determined to regain possession, lunged after Charlie. As they both scrambled for the ball, Charlie made a swift sidestep in an attempt to evade Harry. However, their movements tangled, and Charlie stumbled, landing on top of Harry in a heap of limbs and laughter. The scene was momentarily awkward, with Harry and Charlie sprawled on the ground, their faces flushed from exertion and laughter. The rest of the group paused, eyes wide with surprise, before bursting into hearty laughter at the sight. "Didn't see that coming," George called out between laughs. "Looks like Charlie's giving Harry a new type of tackle." Charlie and Harry exchanged amused glances as they disentangled themselves. "Guess I owe you one," Charlie said with a grin, helping Harry to his feet. Harry chuckled, brushing off some leaves. "Just don't make it a habit. I might have to start defending myself." Despite the minor mishap, the game continued with even more enthusiasm. Andrew, who had been still adjusting to rugby's rough and tumble, was excited. His impressive move earlier in the game had earned him cheers and high fives from his teammates. As the game wound down, everyone felt pleasantly exhausted and thoroughly entertained. The group made their way back to the house, ready to enjoy the meal Mrs. Weasley had been preparing. The smell of roast beef, roasted vegetables, and freshly baked bread filled the Burrows' kitchen, making everyone's mouth water. Mrs. Weasley had outdone herself, preparing a feast that impressed Andrew. "This is absolutely amazing," Andrew said between bites, his eyes wide with delight. "I've never had a meal like this before. It's like stepping into another world." Molly Weasley beamed with pride. "Thank you, dear. I'm glad you're enjoying it. We're always happy to share some of our family traditions with new friends." As the group ate, the conversations flowed easily. The rugby game was the topic of lively discussion, with everyone recounting their favourite moments and playful jabs at each other's performance. With a grin, Charlie recounted the incident when he and Harry collided. "And then, I practically landed on Harry. I thought he was going to tackle me back." Harry laughed, shaking his head. "I wasn't going to hold it against you, Charlie. Just don't make it a regular tactic." The room was filled with warm laughter and the comforting clatter of cutlery. Andrew seemed to be absorbing every moment with curiosity and contentment. After dessert, an assortment of pies and cakes, Andrew excused himself to use the loo. The room, now quieter, was abuzz with the soft hum of conversation. Having noticed Harry's pensive look earlier, Arthur Weasley decided to share some news. "Just so everyone's aware, the trace has been implemented. It's official now." A murmur of reactions filled the room. Some of the Weasleys nodded with understanding or relief, while others looked troubled, as if Fred's absence was keenly felt. The conversation quickly grew heated. Ron scowled. "This is getting ridiculous. It's like they're treating us like criminals." Hermione, always one to stay informed, looked concerned but composed. "It's a drastic measure. but I suppose they believe it's necessary to prevent further exposure. Harry's face tightened, his jaw clenched as he struggled to maintain his composure. The trace, the magical surveillance that could detect any use of magic by witches and wizards, was a sore topic. Harry had witnessed the strain it put on the wizarding community and was deeply frustrated by its implications. Andrew returned just in time to see Harry's expression shift from irritation to a determined set of his shoulders. Harry stood abruptly, pushing back his chair with a scraping sound. "I need some fresh air," Harry said, his voice firm but strained. "Please don't follow me." Without waiting for a response, he headed towards the back door. The room fell into a heavy silence as everyone watched him leave. Andrew looked around, puzzled by the sudden change in atmosphere. "What's going on?" Andrew asked, concern evident in his voice. Arthur sighed, looking weary. "Harry's had a lot on his plate recently. The news about the trace. It's affecting him more than he's letting on." Andrew nodded, a hint of worry still in his eyes. "I see. I hope he's all right." As the door closed behind Harry, he stepped outside into the cool, crisp air of the garden. The sounds of laughter and conversation from inside the burrow were muffled, leaving him with the quiet rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. He walked a few paces away from the house, his mind racing about the trace and its implications. The magical barriers being monitored so closely were a stark reminder of how fragile their world had become. Harry leaned against a nearby tree, briefly closing his eyes to steady his breath. He needed to clear his head and find some semblance of peace amidst the turmoil. The weight of his responsibilities as a police officer and protector of the magical community was heavy, and the day's revelations had pushed him to the edge. After Harry left, the dining room was filled with a heavy silence. Andrew's eyes darted between the door and the faces of those still seated, sensing the unspoken tension in the air. He wanted to follow Harry, but something held him back. Perhaps it was respect for Harry's privacy, or maybe it was the quiet understanding that this was something Harry needed to face alone. But not everyone agreed. Charlie stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. His expression was one of quiet determination as he glanced around the room. He locked eyes briefly with Andrew, who gave a small nod of understanding. Without a word, Charlie made his way out the door, following the path Harry had taken. Outside, the crisp air bit at Charlie's skin, but he hardly noticed. He could see Harry near an old oak tree in the distance, his figure tense and frustrated. As Charlie approached, he saw Harry lashing out, his fists connecting with the tree's rough bark. Each punch seemed to carry the weight of all the anger, fear, and helplessness building up inside him. "Harry." Charlie's voice was calm and steady as he called out to him. "Leave me alone!" Harry's voice was sharp, almost a growl as he punched the tree. His knuckles were raw, bloodied from the impact, but he didn't seem to care. "Just leave me be, Charlie." Charlie didn't move. He stood his ground, his heart aching for the man before him. He knew that Harry wasn't just angry. He was hurt, overwhelmed by his burden. And despite Harry's words, Charlie wasn't about to abandon him to face it alone. "I'm not going anywhere, Harry," Charlie said firmly. "Not when you need someone." Harry's fists slowed, his breath coming in ragged gasps as anger drained from him. He leaned his forehead against the tree, his whole body trembling with the effort to hold himself together. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unsaid emotions that neither could easily express. Finally, the dam broke. Harry's shoulders began to shake, and the first tears slipped from his tightly shut eyes. A sob tore from his throat, and before he knew it, he had turned away from the tree and into Charlie's arms. Charlie held him tightly, his eyes stinging with unshed tears as Harry wept on his shoulder. He didn't say anything, didn't offer any platitudes or try to soothe Harry with empty words. Instead, he just stood there, offering the solid, unwavering presence that Harry needed. For what felt like an eternity, they stayed like that, Harry releasing all the pent-up pain, fear, and frustration in the safety of Charlie's embrace, and Charlie holding him, letting him know without words that he wasn't alone. When the tears finally began to subside, Harry pulled back slightly, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. He looked at Charlie, his face flushed and his eyes red-rimmed, but there was a softness in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Thank you," Harry whispered, his voice hoarse from crying. Charlie smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from Harry's face. "You don't have to go through this alone, Harry. Not ever." Harry nodded, his chest still heaving with the remnants of his earlier outburst. But the anger was gone now, replaced by a profound exhaustion and a fragile sense of relief. He felt lighter, as if the weight he'd been carrying had eased just a little. "Let's go back inside," Charlie said softly, his hand resting on Harry's shoulder. "You don't have to say anything if you're not ready. Just be with us." Harry hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, let's go back." As they turned to walk back toward the burrow, they were met with a startling sight. Andrew was standing at the door, his face pale and his expression frozen. The warmth of the earlier autumn day seemed to vanish instantly as Harry and Charlie stopped in their tracks, their eyes locked on Andrew. "Andrew," Harry began, his voice thick with concern.